Malcolm Hayes boarded the plane quietly, taking his assigned first-class seat 1A with the composure befitting a senior federal judge known for his keen intellect. Moments after settling in with his book of poetry, flight attendant Sarah Mitchell approached. Flight attendant accuses a black judge of lying, but she had no idea who she was dealing with. What started as a disrespectful confrontation quickly turned into a lesson in authority and consequences. Calm and composed, the judge didn't raise his voice. He simply made one phone call. Within minutes, the flight attendant who had mocked and accused him was escorted off the plane, fired on the spot. Flight attendant accuses a black judge of lying, and the tables turned faster than anyone expected. This true story is a powerful reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and disrespect can come at a high cost. Watch until the end to see how quiet power speaks the loudest. "Excuse me, sir," she said loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Can I see your boarding pass again, please?" Hayes handed it over without hesitation. "This says seat 1A, she emphasized, studying both the pass and his face. "This is a first-class seat. Are you sure this isn't a mistake?" "There's no mistake," Hayes replied evenly. Sarah's voice hardened. "Sir, I must ask you to move to economy. We can resolve this later, but for now I need the seat cleared." Without argument, Hayes gathered his belongings and walked to the back of the plane. Once seated in economy, he sent a brief text. "Removed from first class. Boarding pass denied. No explanation." What Sarah failed to realize was that this passenger wasn't just anyone. He was a federal judge with connections to the Aviation Oversight Board. His single message set off immediate alarms in Horizon Air's executive offices. Meanwhile, another flight attendant, Emma, questioned Sarah's decision. His ticket clearly indicated 1A when he boarded. "I know what I saw," Sarah dismissed her. "Look, I've been doing this for 15 years. I can tell when someone doesn't belong. Trust me." In the cockpit, Captain Ames received an urgent call from Horizon Air's executive response team. "We've received a report regarding a passenger in first class who was mistakenly removed. His name is Malcolm Hayes, a federal judge who works closely with the Aviation Oversight Board. He had a valid first-class ticket, but your lead attendant compelled him to move. Legal is involved, and the CEO has been briefed." The captain immediately summoned Sarah to the cockpit. "Did you remove a passenger from seat 1A?" he asked tensely. "Yes, a man was seated there. I checked his pass, but he didn't seem—" She hesitated. "I assumed it was an error. He didn't match the typical profile." "You assumed," the captain responded sharply. "That passenger is Judge Malcolm Hayes. You just removed a sitting federal judge from first class without justification. Legal is now involved, and the executive team is monitoring this flight in real time." Sarah's composure crumbled. "What do you want me to do?" "You're going to fix it now." With shaking hands, Sarah approached Hayes in economy. "Sir, there's been a misunderstanding. I would like to escort you back to your original seat." Hayes looked at her steadily. "A misunderstanding? You had my boarding pass. You checked my name. You noted my seat number. What exactly was unclear?" His voice remained composed but penetrating. "You didn't question anyone else in first class, just me. Why is that?" Sarah couldn't answer. The walk back to first class felt like a march of shame, with passengers' questioning eyes following her every step. Later, Hayes received another message. "CEO is briefed. Direct action will be taken. Upon landing, brace yourself for a formal apology and a crew review." He had no desire for drama, only accountability. This wasn't about revenge, it was about principle. Behind her now crumbling professional facade, Sarah knew it too. She had crossed a line, and the consequences were waiting at the gate. The descent into Atlanta International Airport seemed interminable to Sarah. Her hands trembled slightly as she performed the final cabin checks, avoiding eye contact with passengers who had witnessed the incident. Her usual commanding presence had evaporated, replaced by a nervous efficiency. As the plane touched down, Captain Ames made an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Atlanta. Local time is 4:35 p.m. Please remain seated until we reach the gate." And Judge Hayes, if you would kindly remain on board briefly after deplaning, the station manager would like to speak with you." The cabin fell silent. Several passengers turned to look at Hayes, who showed no reaction, calmly gathering his belongings. At the gate, Sarah noticed two figures waiting in the jet bridge: a woman in a tailored suit with the airline's executive pin and a man carrying a leather portfolio. Their expressions were grave. "Ms. Mitchell, please remain after passengers have deplaned," the captain instructed over the intercom. Sarah's stomach tightened. When the final passenger exited, the executives boarded. The woman approached Hayes first. "Judge Hayes, I'm Patricia Lawson, Regional Director for Horizon Air. On behalf of our airline, I want to express our deepest apologies for your experience today." Hayes nodded but said nothing. Patricia continued, "We'd like to discuss this matter privately if you're willing. We have a conference room available." "I appreciate the gesture," Hayes replied evenly, "but anything you need to say can be said here." The second executive stepped forward. "Judge Hayes, I'm Michael Turner from Legal. What happened today was completely unacceptable. We've already initiated an internal investigation." Sarah stood frozen near the galley, feeling lightheaded as the conversation unfolded. "Ms. Mitchell," Patricia called, "please join us." Sarah moved forward mechanically. The passengers were gone, but the humiliation remained very public among her colleagues. "Ms. Mitchell, did you remove Judge Hayes from first class despite his valid boarding pass?" Patricia asked directly. Yes, but I thought—" "Based on what evidence?" Michael interrupted. Sarah faltered. "There was no evidence. It was an assumption." "An assumption based on what?" Patricia pressed. The cabin fell silent. Everyone knew the answer, but Sarah couldn't bring herself to say it aloud. Hayes finally spoke. "I've been flying first class on this airline for 15 years. This is the first time my right to be there has been questioned. I don't believe that's coincidental." Patricia turned to Sarah. "Ms. Mitchell, your employment with Horizon Air is terminated. Effective immediately. Please surrender your credentials and gather your personal items." Sarah gasped. "Just like that? Don't I deserve a hearing, or—" "This isn't a matter that requires deliberation," Michael explained coldly. "You violated company policy, federal anti-discrimination laws, and the basic dignity we owe our passengers. Your actions have exposed this airline to significant liability. But my record, 15 years without, makes this even more troubling," Patricia finished. "You should have known better." The aftermath. The story broke the next morning. The headline in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution read, "Federal Judge Removed from First-Class Seat in Apparent Racial Profiling Incident." Social media erupted with outrage. Horizon Air issued a statement by noon. "We acknowledge with deep regret the discriminatory treatment experienced by Judge Malcolm Hayes on Flight 714. The employee responsible has been terminated, and we are conducting comprehensive bias training across our organization. We are committed to ensuring our airline is welcoming to all passengers." 3 days later, Hayes received a formal written apology from Horizon's CEO, along with an offer of unlimited first-class travel for a year. He declined the latter, noting in his response, "This isn't about compensation. It's about dignity. No passenger should be judged by anything other than their boarding pass." Sarah Mitchell's perspective shifted dramatically in the following weeks. Initial anger gave way to painful self-reflection. She had prided herself on professionalism, yet one unexamined bias had derailed her entire career. She wrote Hayes a personal letter. "I've spent weeks trying to justify my actions to myself, but the truth is painfully simple. I made an assumption based solely on your appearance. For 15 years, I believed I treated everyone equally, but clearly I did not. My apology can't undo what happened, but I want you to know that this experience has fundamentally changed me." Hayes never responded directly, but when interviewed about the incident months later for a legal journal, he offered this reflection: "Justice isn't always served in courtrooms. Sometimes it happens in ordinary moments when people are held accountable for the assumptions they make about others. The most important judgments we make aren't from the bench. They're the ones we make every day about the people we encounter. The incident prompted Horizon Air to implement new training protocols. In an ironic twist, Sarah Mitchell eventually found work at a diversity consulting firm, sharing her story as a cautionary tale. As for Judge Hayes, he continued flying first class on various airlines. He never raised his voice that day on the plane, never lost his composure, but his quiet dignity spoke volumes. With one simple phone call, he had demonstrated that justice, while sometimes delayed, is rarely denied to those who stand firmly on principle. 6 months after the incident, Judge Malcolm Hayes sat in his chambers reviewing case files when his clerk knocked on the door. "Judge, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's been waiting for over an hour." Hayes looked up. "Who is it?" "Sarah Mitchell, sir. The flight attendant from—" "I remember," Hayes said, closing the file. He paused, then nodded. "Send her in." Sarah entered, noticeably different from the confident flight attendant he'd encountered. Gone was the crisp uniform, replaced by a simple blouse and slacks. Her posture, once rigid with authority, now seemed hesitant. "Judge Hayes, thank you for seeing me," she said, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. Hayes gestured to a chair. "Please, sit down." Sarah took a seat, clutching a leather portfolio similar to Hayes's own. "I've written you several letters," she began. "I received them," he acknowledged. "But you never responded." Hayes folded his hands. "Ms. Mitchell, I wasn't sure what response would be appropriate. Your apologies seemed sincere, but I wondered what you wanted from me. Forgiveness? Absolution?" Sarah shook her head. "Neither, actually. I came because I want to show you something." She opened her portfolio and removed a document. "After I was fired, I spent weeks angry. At the airline, at you, at myself. Then I started really listening to conversations about bias, about how it operates unconsciously. I enrolled in a diversity education program." She handed him the document, a certificate of completion for an intensive 3-month course. That led to an internship with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which became a part-time position. But something was still missing. Hayes studied her carefully. "What was that?" "Accountability," Sarah replied. "Not just being held accountable, but holding myself accountable. So I started speaking at industry conferences about what happened that day, about how 15 years of believing I treated everyone equally meant nothing in the face of one revealing moment." Hayes nodded slowly. "That takes courage. Last month, I was approached by 3 major airlines to help develop anti-bias training for flight crews. They want to use my story, our story, as a case study." She paused. "But I won't do it without your permission." Hayes leaned back, considering. "You've turned this into a career." "I've turned it into a mission," Sarah corrected. "And yes, it pays the bills. But that's not why I'm doing it." "Why are you?" Sarah met his gaze directly. "Because what I did to you that day happens to people every day, everywhere. The difference is, most don't have the position or power to make that one phone call. Their dignity gets violated, and the world just keeps turning." Hayes was silent for a long moment. "The day after our flight, I received calls from dozens of colleagues and friends. Everyone wanted to know if I was planning to sue, to press charges for civil rights violations." "Why didn't you?" "Because punishment isn't always the same as progress," Hayes replied. "The airline took immediate action. You lost your job. What would a lawsuit have accomplished beyond making headlines?" He stood and walked to his window. "My grandfather was a Pullman porter on the railroads in the 1940s. He told me stories about how he was treated, the indignities large and small. He couldn't make that one phone call. He had to smile through it all to keep his job." Turning back to Sarah, he continued. "When I became a judge, he told me, 'Don't just wear the robe. Remember what it represents. Justice isn't just about punishing wrongs. It's about making things right.'" Sarah nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. "You have my permission," Hayes said finally. "Use our story. But on one condition." "Anything." "I want to participate, not just as the subject of the case study, but as a co-presenter." If we're going to tell this story, let's tell it together, from both perspectives. Sarah looked stunned. You would do that? Justice works best when it creates change, Ms. Mitchell. It seems you're genuinely trying to create change. I'd like to be part of that. 3 weeks later, they stood together before a room of airline executives and crew trainers. As Hayes watched Sarah speak, articulate, passionate, and deeply honest about her failings, he thought about how a single moment of discrimination had transformed into an unexpected partnership. The incident that could have ended with mere punishment had instead catalyzed something more valuable, a genuine commitment to change, not just from Sarah Mitchell, but from an industry being forced to confront its blind spots. Sometimes justice wears unexpected faces, Hayes told the audience during his portion. Sometimes it arrives through difficult moments that force us to see ourselves more clearly. And sometimes, the person who wronged you becomes the very person who helps ensure that wrong doesn't happen to someone else. As they concluded to applause, Hayes recalled his grandfather's words about the robe and what it represented. He hadn't needed to wear it that day on the plane. Justice had found its way nonetheless.